Hello and welcome. You're watching this edition of Captains of Industry with me, Godfrey Mutizwa. Now, if Thapelo Tsheole were a company in business journalism, we would describe him as a single commodity company because in 20 years, Mr. Tsheole has done nothing outside financial markets. His world has been about capital markets development, foreign exchange trading, structured products, and financial markets development. Well, the man is here to explain why he is a mono-product man. Mr. Tsheole, thank you for coming through. So I wanted to know whether this is you living your father's dream or this is you living your dream.
It is me living my own dream. I belong to the financial markets. I think it's a calling, and I think I landed in the right career and in the right work environment.
Absolutely. And what a journey it has been for you, because when I was going through preparing my notes, I saw you certainly have traversed the world and you have done the education to back it up. Let's talk about where it all began.
Yeah, of course, I like many of our African brothers, I started in the rural village of Muchudi, where I was born, and that's where I started my primary school, and then I did my secondary school. I moved to the city to pursue my degree at the University of Botswana. And then at the University of Botswana, that's when I got selected among the top students who were directly hired by the Central Bank of Botswana, which is like the Reserve Bank. We call it a central bank this side. And then from there, I spent about 5 or so years at the Central Bank. And then I went to do my master's in financial markets in Rhodes University in South Africa. After that, it was master's in financial markets. That's where my interest in stock markets, capital markets, money markets, forex actually became much more. And then when I finished my first master's degree in Rhodes University, master's in financial markets, I went briefly to Bank of Botswana for 3 months, and then I went to the stock exchange. And then I've been with the stock exchange since 2007 now.
And it's a story that we've covered here as well on CNBC Africa, and we can talk a little bit about the work that you're doing there a little later. But I wanted to trace back a little bit and ask what tickled the interest in financial markets or in finance and economics. Because, when we were growing up, and I'm talking about 1970s, I don't know what you can talk about in terms of your time. When you were growing up, you were told you become a teacher, or you could be a nurse, or perhaps you go and join the army, or you're a policeman.
Yeah, you'll be very surprised that I knew nothing about stock exchanges and capital markets, especially when I was still growing up, especially when I was still at primary and at senior secondary school. More so that I was schooling in the village. So what typically happened in our environment was that students who attained higher marks in class, like myself then, were told to do pure sciences. We were told to become medical doctors. And I did pure sciences at secondary school. And then after I finished my secondary school, I had the dreams of becoming a medical doctor. I had the marks to take me there. I had the interest in science. But then when we went for national service, I met some gentleman who was older. I think he was from Europe. And then he spoke to me about this thing called economics and then social sciences. And then he took it over me. And then that was the turning moment. And then when the university time came, I never applied for sciences. And more especially that, during secondary school, I was a good history student. I used to like the social sciences from that perspective. And therefore, I just changed my mind, and then I applied for social sciences as at my first degree at the University of Botswana. And then I got accepted to do economics, demography, statistics, sociology, and a lot of other things. But I ultimately ended up doing a single major in economics. And I found it to be very interesting because, it gives you continuous engagement. on everyday basis. I mean, you need to be thinking about the changing economics, the changing environment, the changing interest rate, inflation, the GDP growth rate. It's
Yeah.
not so static like a lot of other science students. So, that's what makes me tick and makes us tick. I mean, you can imagine some of us who are lucky enough to land in the stock market. I mean, the indices changes like every second. The markets in the US opens at 3 p.m. Botswana time. By that time, we are just about to close the market here. And then by the time the US close here, the other markets in the Asia are about to open. So it's a sort of a whole day type of engagement and excitement.
Some would say that's quite an esoteric world, but as you say, it can be exciting for people who are steeped in it. But I wanted to talk a little bit about your Bank of Botswana experience. We tend to think of central banks as places that are conservative, structured, strict, and all those other kind of things. How did you find it?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of conservatism in the central banks. Of course, I started my career at the central bank at the payment and settlement. I was responsible for making international settlements and foreign currency settlements and payments for foreign currencies. And then I was there for about 2 years. And then I moved to the more juicy department, foreign reserve management, where I was part of a team of 5 who were in charge of the foreign reserve management. And by that time, it's about 13 or so years ago, Botswana's foreign reserves were still at all-time high. And it was good to be a member of the team that was managing such a big portfolio. I was a money market and foreign forex dealer in the international dealing desk, and therefore it was very exciting. I mean, I used to be looking at about 3 screens, computer screens at my disposal, and then also just doing that dealing. It was exciting that time, especially that we were also still very young. I mean, to sell and buy money, especially millions of dollars at that particular time, is one of the most exciting things to go through in the career.
Yeah, I can imagine, because I remember those days as well. Botswana was lauded all over the world for its foreign exchange management and also the large amount of reserves that the country was keeping at the time. An oasis when you looked around you at other African economies. Let's talk a little bit about your present day job and what a challenge it is as well in this environment where now we've got conflict, we've got oil prices that are hitting all-time highs, and we know everybody suffers when you have oil prices at those levels, even though there are others who are benefiting. I wanted to know about the challenge of trying to keep investors interested in markets such as Botswana at a time when everybody is uncertain, and you keep hearing this word, flight to safety, flight to safety.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a very tricky environment. One of the best things that we tend to experience from our side is that, our market are not quickly reactive. They don't react quite quickly to some of the global events. And this is when the advantage is actually, to an extent that, when the other countries are fighting far off from us, our markets don't tend to quickly react. They tend to be, so our investors will ordinarily not experience the immediate losses that they might go in. Of course, yes, when such events happens, there are short-term negative effects like the increase in oil prices, which in our economies will be felt over a period of time after the events have actually happened. But it's quite challenging. I mean, to be running a stock exchange in the world of uncertainty, because you are always in your toes, trying to guess or trying to see or imagine that things don't go drastically very wrong. But the robustness of the structures that we have, I think, are able to survive the current environment. But of course, it's very challenging. But our economies also, apart from reliance in the external factors, I tend to believe that also the domestic factors play a crucial role, and therefore it will be able to positively substitute what could be the negative impact. But ultimately, if this conflict become prolonged, I think we are likely to experience some damaging effects.
Any large outflows of foreign monies or people invested on the Botswana Stock Exchange?
We haven't experienced that for now. I think, of course, when the conflict really escalates, I think we are likely to experience that. But for now, I think we are still comfortably fine.
The other day, I did an interview with the CEO of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, Leila Fourie, and one of the things we talked about was one of the challenges that she's facing here in Johannesburg, which is delistings. The large number of companies that are leaving exchanges, some being taken private, some being taken over by foreign investors, which is in a way is a good thing, but also what it does, of course, is reduces the diversity of investments that you have on your exchange. Let's talk delistings in the Botswana context. Has that been an issue?
Yeah, I think it was an issue, but it was not as drastic as what I read in the article yesterday experienced by Johannesburg. I think we have had one or two delistings over the years. I think 2020, one or two, 2019, about one or so. So we've been quite steady in terms of that, but also in terms of strategy wise from the BSE perspective, we have designed a value proposition for listing for majority of our companies, and also we have also launched an SME type of program where we want to develop the pipeline going forward. And I think what we are seeing is some elements of positive feedbacks and positive movement. It's only that a lot of other companies in our economy, really for them to list, they need to start to corporatize themselves, to put themselves in a situation where they look like a proper corporate, put governance structures in place, and also put some board in place, because majority of our economies are dominated by family-owned companies that have got actually no governance and no boards in place. So for them to prepare them to be listed entities, it normally takes some time. So I think the long short of the answer is that we have experienced some level of delistings over a period of time, but I think the pipeline for listing looks to be much more optimistic.
Yeah, I was going to say the corollary to that, of course, to delistings is listings, and let's talk about that. How is the pipeline?
Yeah, I think we're although I won't mention names, we are seeing a number of companies that have shown interest in terms of listing. We have seen a number of entities now also not necessarily looking at normal listings, but looking much more at the instruments, to list the instruments in the BSE. And of course, last year we did very well. We listed about 4 ETFs in 1 year. And this year, I think we are looking at listing a number of ETFs also. So that will be very good. And also, we've been exploring other instruments and other markets, especially the spec model, because some companies don't want to list, but there's always a way in which you can actually innovate and bring some shares of those companies to the market. And that is the way through spec. And we've seen a lot of this spec model fast developing better in the US and in the UK over the past 2 years. And then we have a number of 1 or 2 people working on that structure, and ultimately they will bring that to the market in due course.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, how soon do you expect that? Because it's a story that we've also been following here in Johannesburg, because we did see, of course, that boom that happened in the US, but here in our parts of the world, we hadn't seen anything.
Yeah.
Could that be this year?
I think I think if they work fast enough, we can be able to possibly see the first spec listing in our market this year. But now the only fear that we have is that with the coming up of winter around May, June, July, we just hope we don't get another variant of corona, because if that comes up, I think it's just going to delay a lot of other things. Because one of the experiences that we had last year was that when we wanted to list some of the instruments, when we are in the listings process, one of the participants or one of the people involved will ultimately get corona, and then they are out, and then they will need to wait. When after waiting for this other one is the next different intermediary. So it's quite of very disturbing if that comes up. So I think that's what we can only hope and pray. But with the level of vaccinations that we have had as a country, we hope they're significant enough to reduce the likely impact of any variant that comes up.
Yeah, you referred earlier to family-owned businesses being dominant within the Botswana economy. Another source, of course, for you to find companies to list, and we've spoken about this before, are the parastatals, the state-owned companies. How far are you from convincing government to get these companies to come in meaningful numbers?
Yeah, I think, look, we've had a long-standing conversation with government, and I think government understands the importance of privatization, especially that this is very advantageous to government because it's government taking out the burden from government. But the process, typical of majority of governments globally, especially in Africa, the process is painfully very slow. It's extremely very slow, and we are doing all what we can, even to offer some level of assistance to government. But it's still sort of a long way to go.
Are there any specific ones that you would like to see listed?
Yes, I think there are a number of companies that we really want to see listed. I mean, the number one, we have the Meat Commission. The Botswana Meat Commission. I think in our meetings with them, we have met them. We know that if that company can be structured in certain sense, there are aspects of it that are actually profit making, and those aspects are the ones that can totally be considered to be taken to the market. And also, still in government, there are a lot of companies that are doing a huge infrastructure development. We have the Botswana Oil that need to do the oil reserves. We have the railway company that needs to do the rail network. So what we have we have the Power Corporation that have got a lot of opportunities in terms of power generation and even clean energy. So our argument is that all that can look into the market to provide capital, and indeed there is capital in our market.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned all those things because I wanted to tell you that we're going to share this program on our Dubai-based platforms. So hopefully there will be a connection. The government gets its act together and gets running. Before we leave listings, I wanted to ask if you have any target for this year.
Yeah, the target in terms of for this year is that we are quite bullish in terms of ETFs. We'll probably get 3+. In terms of companies, we want to get at least one, and we'll be lucky to get 2. It's only that the companies that we are working on, I think there's still some level of corporatization, or they need to do some structures for them to come to the market. But I think we are quite hopeful that 1 or 2 might come, but I would say 1 for now.
Okay, let's widen the conversation and talk about the region. Now, we know that there's a Sadc Stock Exchanges Committee that you are chair of. I think you're still chairman, yes?
Yes.
I want to know what you guys are working on, because this dream of regional exchanges cooperating and working together has been with us for a very long time. I was going to say for far too long, but we want to give you an opportunity to see if you are going to make any progress.
Yeah, I mean, so fortunately, we have got a number of exciting projects that we are currently working on. Number one, we managed to get some funding from FSD, which is a British donor. I think they gave us something like up to, I think it's about 9 million to 11 million rand to work on a green bond program for Sadc. So what they've basically done is that they are going to be looking at the opportunities in the Sadc market for green bonds, and then develop the pipeline, and also help stock exchanges to have rules, listing requirements that are standards in terms of the framework to be able to list green bonds. That is going quite very well. I think a number of countries, of all the 14 stock exchanges, are working towards that. Of course, some stock exchanges already have green bonds, social bonds, like South Africa, Namibia, and I think to some extent Mauritius. So I think the pipeline is still being developed. I think is getting one very well fine. And also we also have a funding that we managed to get from the African Development Bank to work on the interconnectivity of the markets in the Sadc region. It's a project that we are starting this year. Of course, it will take some time, but I think based on the African linkages project, I think the Sadc interconnectivity project will also be have some headways. Of course, there are different effects that we experience because I mean Sadc is a big block, unlike other blocks in West Africa. We are talking here about 13 countries and 14 stock exchanges at varying levels of development. And therefore, this is likely to take some time. The other project that we successfully worked on was the centralization of trading of especially government bonds in exchanges. These instruments normally or historically were trading at central banks. And as the Committee of Sadc Stock Exchanges, were able to convince the central bank governors and ministers of finance to say we need to take some significant level of government bond trading to the stock exchange, because it is only at the stock exchange that we can have the mass, that you can have the population of all our countries who can easily tap into the government bond market. And by so doing, we increase the level of savings and investments by the ordinary citizens. And as stock exchanges, I think we have got the widest reach than central bank or commercial banks in terms of the retail investors. And this project is going on well fine. All countries are moving towards that. Some have chosen total centralization of trading of bonds in the stock market. Some will be a hybrid model. Some want to be traded outside the stock exchange. Some will be traded in the stock exchange. I think it's one of the few very successful projects that we are carrying on because it gives our population or people in our citizens an enormous investment opportunity because government bonds are much more safer instruments than your typical equity.
So great that you are working on that front. I love what you're doing because it's an important conversation. As I was saying earlier, it's a conversation that we've been talking about for way too long. I remember the days of Russell Lubcha here in Johannesburg talking about unifying African stock exchanges, Sadc stock exchanges, and we haven't gone anywhere. And I wanted to know why that is the case. Is it a case of the financial systems not being developed to the same extent, or is it a question of egos and the inability of the people who are involved to find a way of working together?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a number of factors. Number one, if you look at the 13 countries, or actually even 16 countries in Sadc, because we have 14 stock exchanges in 13 countries. It is only DRC, Comoros, and Madagascar that don't have stock exchanges. You have issues of currency, number one. I mean, look at how many currencies are there across all these markets. For 13 or 14 or 16 currencies at various levels of exchange rates, others pegged to something as an exchange rate, others a lot of political influence in terms of determining the currency which they use. And therefore, it actually becomes extremely very difficult to converge in terms of interconnectivity in terms of the market. And also, there's a lot of protectionism in our markets. Other countries have got no exchange controls. You can move money, you can move out money. But other countries, when people want to move money from South Africa to Botswana, they need to get the Reserve Bank approving that. And if the Reserve Bank doesn't want, the money won't be moved. And therefore, it impacts the flow of funds even within Sadc itself. And then there's also a lot of restrictions. I mean, you look at prudential rules across markets, pension fund prudential rules across markets. The rules dictate you can invest this much, so much somewhere else. And even if there's leverage in that regard, I mean, we ordinarily don't invest in each other's market. I mean, I'll give you a clear example. Majority of the investors that we have in Botswana as foreign investors are from the UK and the US.
Wow.
And actually, SADC investors contribute very little to our turnover or to investment in Botswana Stock Exchange compared to US investors and UK investors. So there's very little inter-trade between the SADC countries. Sometimes it's actually virtually less. We tend to want to even trade, or we tend to trade even more with the outside world than with SADC. Even where in instances where some of these markets are quite mature market. I mean, you look at Botswana, Mauritius, Namibia, Tanzania, Dar es Salaam. I mean, these are some of the markets in Botswana, in SADC, that are relatively quite mature, where we could be letting the flow of funds to just move from one market to the other and then enjoy the benefit of intra-Africa liquidity instead of depending on the Western world for liquidity.
Absolutely. It's crazy and it's strange that we don't trust each other, but we trust other markets that are run by people who are outside of the continent. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah. I wanted to ask if you think this was a dream that might be achieved during you and my lifetime, or perhaps this is just a pipe dream. We should just forget about it and work separately in our silos.
Yeah, I think things are moving. I'm quite optimistic that things are moving in the right direction. You saw at the African continent level, there are a number of exchanges that have come together to start a project, and also even now at the SADC level, that funding that we've been provided for by the African Development Bank, I think it will move things into the right direction. I think I'm optimistic that in the next maybe 5 or 7 years, I hope that is within our lifetime, we'll see a totally different picture. It's definitely within our lifetime, but probably not our waking lifetime.
Absolutely, COVID permitting, I must add. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I have learned a lot today. I mean, there are 20 African stock exchanges, 14 of them, would you believe, are in Southern Africa. Thapelo Tsheole, CEO of the Botswana Stock Exchange. Sir, thank you very much for your time, for your insights. So that's another edition of Captains of Industry. Thank you for watching. See you very soon.